I'm here to talk about practical sci-fi. Does anyone like science fiction in here, in the room? Raise your hand. Yeah, we got a good stronghold. I like it, right? So if I define it, you're gonna be okay with that. So science fiction is entertainment, right? But it's a cultural artifact of today. It's of the present projecting into the future. And so science fiction is really good about helping our popular culture envision a different future than the one that we have now and the different path that we're on. But it's still entertainment, right? And it's still framed with different biases, and we might be at the whim of the author themselves, right? So while there are great things to be learned from science fiction, it is less academic, right? Like it's okay to say that. But things like Star Trek helped us imagine a future of future of medicine, right? A future of diagnosing someone instantly. We have virtual doctors now. That's pretty wicked and cool. And so we're living in an exciting time where science fiction that has helped us imagine our future and represent the cultural ideology of today. It is rooted in bias, right? So you'll see things like very colonialist things and so on, right? Maybe some dose of racism around. But so it's rooted in that. I'll move on. Because what we're really talking about now is science fiction has been great as an entertainment tool to help get people on board with a different future than the one we have presently. But what if we apply this projection, we apply this future thinking to design? So we apply speculation to design. It's speculative design. That's what that is. So it's an academic discipline, and so it has different flavors, different lenses, different foci, whatever that word is. But in the end, it is all design. It's design process. It's using the tools and the framing that we have at hand to design for the future. So Anna mentioned a 5-year plan and then doing this backcasting. That's something I'm going to talk about. So that's a spoiler alert. But that's a perfect example of how speculative design can be practical. It can be fantastical. And that's okay too. It's really great. It's a playground. Design has all different approaches to it. So speculative design itself is specializing in the what-ifs of tomorrow. So it's a way for us to manifest the possibilities and prepare us for these inconvenient challenges to facilitate a more desirable, responsible path into the future via the methods of design and projection. It's actually not a super new thing. We've given it a new name. It used to be called futurism, but it has more rigor to it now. There's more of an academic field of study behind it and ways we can do it in an appropriate and practical manner. Or not practical, right? Which is, again, it's totally fine. We're in the Midwest, so that's why it's called practical sci-fi. Who here saw Black Panther? Great. That is exactly what I expected and hoped to see. It's one of the most popular films today because it is a cultural artifact of the present. And it is rooted, though. Like what you might not know about the city, the utopia of Wakanda, is the amount of research and design thought and effort that went behind building a society for entertainment. The futuristic society is actually based on people of Africa living in the terrain, in a particular culture, but removing colonialism, removing aggression from the picture, and posing that question, what if, right? What if that was the future? What if that's what happened? And so it's a speculation of how this high tech would evolve in an isolated society with infinite amount of resources. So it's a beautiful example of Afrofuturism, which is really cool if you want to dive down that rabbit hole. So I need to speed it up. So there are a lot of different elements and designs that were present in Wakanda, and these slides will be available later, so you can look at them. Also look it up. It all centers around, again, around this identity of what if colonialism didn't take place and we could have a society there. Black Mirror is a juxtaposition to Wakanda. Who here has seen Black Mirror? Great, yes, normally that's not the case. and so I'm really glad. I know it's probably not the best vision of speculative design, but it is what we call design fiction. A lot of research and thought did go into, again, these entertainment, but there was research behind it. And it is more dystopian. So it's meant as a thought probe for us to take ownership of what we're doing with the future, with technology, and what it means to be human. That's what speculative design is about, is speculating if these things happen, if this is the reality, what does it mean to be human? And that's what we do as designers all the time, is think about that. A way to frame this and to understand the future or potential futures is the futures cone. This was developed by Joseph Voros, and he was in finance, right? So this is coming from financial advisors and like finance as a discipline, but it's very applicable to when we want to be strategic in our decisions to have a more preferable future. Because what's on the outside of the cone, right, that is probably like, what the heck? Never gonna happen. Like, it could maybe happen in some far-off reality, never gonna happen. But in the darker, like once you get closer to the center, it's more realistic. And this is time, right? So the further you go out on time, the more variables there are. But if we project out and we understand maybe a more preferable society or a more preferable future, we can backcast and think about what it might take to get us there, or project what currently exists into that future. How does it respond? So Jesse James Garrett gave a great talk about designing the designer. This was last year at Midwest UX, and it's available. I recommend you watching it. But one of his main qualities that you need to do as a designer is to embrace the adjacent possible. And that's what we're doing in speculative design. It is the adjacent possible and where do we go from here? Where do we go from there? What is that adjacent possible? And as designers, it's up for us to envision that and to take action on it, because if we don't, then it's going to happen anyway. We might as well steer the helm, right? So it seriously is a crazy time to be alive. Like, we have global warming coming up. We have an interesting political landscape right now. And you know, it's what is it? There's riots, there are shootings, and it's all happening. Like, we're at the center of it here in the United States. And so speculative design can help us navigate our futures. We know what the present is like now. What do we want tomorrow to be like? What do we want 5 years to be like? What do we want 10 years to be like? The further you get out, again, the more variables there are, the less sure it is. But it's still a thought process that you can take into your organizations, you can take into your process to create better products for today. It's kind of like accessibility design in a way. Like, if we design for the lowest common, I don't want to say the lowest common denominator, but if we design for everyone will be able to use our product. It's going to be a better experience for everyone. If we design for alternate futures, if they happen, we're going to be good. We might have a better future. We might have a better today, is what I'm trying to say. So Dunn and Raby, they're like the godfathers of speculative design, and they have a couple books, they have a website. They're kind of more on that probe. They're more on like that fantastical realm, but the stuff is very interesting. Their work is very interesting, and it is rooted in research and science, which is the heart of speculative design. This is not necessarily fiction. It's using variables we truly know today to use the methods that we have to project forward. So an example of this, governments are doing this. I'm probably just going to take a little bit more time. Sorry, guys. So governments are doing this. We have UK government has a whole division for futurism, and this is one of their wonderful projects that was about what does it mean to be in an aging population. If the majority of the population is a younger population, what does it mean to age there? I highly recommend reading that report or looking into it. The work is fantastic, and it can be applicable to large-scale wicked problems that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. So design sets agendas. It doesn't have to be in service. I do want to take a caveat that design is a service, and so in order for it to be design, we have to have a client of sorts. But even in speculative design, we can still use it as a way to explore the world, just explore our businesses, our organizations, our present, to understand how we want it to be and what it would take to get us there. So, right, I did say practical. I've been sprinkling that in. Retrocasting, I've been talking about it. Anna mentioned it. I call it strategic foresighting, because when you're doing it at that level, that's what I like to frame it as, so that it's an easier sell. We're just trying, like, there are different ways to do it. We can imagine a future and design products or services for that future, or we can take what we currently have and project it into that future. How does it respond? What changes are we going to have to make if a certain set of outcomes happen? So if there are different cultural shifts along the time scale, what does that mean, right? Like, for what we're trying to achieve, we're all in it together. Let's do it together, right? So something that we don't always recognize or talk about enough, it's starting to come up in the design culture, is that design does have these hidden impacts, and they influence the ecosystems that they're a part of. So the products and services that we bring into the world not only affect the users that we're designing for, but it affects societies and ecosystems that it lives in, right? So you don't even, like, it even has a ripple effect than what we do. So we can either blindly let the future unfold, or we can strategically and smartly and intelligently take control of it. And of course, so many things can happen. There's so many unknowns, but at least we can be prepared. Financial advisors don't say, well, we don't really know what's going to happen, but don't sell your stock today. Just leave it and see what happens, right? Like, we make choices to impact our future. I won't show this video because I'm behind on time. I wanted to end on this really happy, positive note. But Honda, big company, very practical, a lot at stake with money. They did this. They speculated into the future of, okay, autonomous vehicles, we know they're going to happen for sure. What do we do to enhance the human experience with these autonomous vehicles? Like, how are we going to, like, that's our jobs. We're enhancing lived life. We know it's already happening. Let's take it the next step further and see if, and we can test that out. Is it going to be a viable product? Is that something people are going to buy? Probably. I want an autonomous vehicle that can climb around mountains, that has a hot air balloon up top, so that when I'm riding around the desert, I can go look at a view. That sounds pretty great, right? So that's what I'm trying to say, in essence, is speculative design doesn't have to be fantastical. It's just being a good designer, right? Like, you're thinking about the context, you're thinking about how your product, your design affects people, and the future and taking ownership of what you bring into the world. We have matured beyond the Silicon Valley ethos of move fast and break things. We are now at a position in the human experience to take control of it, and let's do things a little smarter, because if we move fast and break things, we might be breaking people's lives. Like, lives are at stake in the things that we do, and so let's be a good ancestor, to do a nod to Alan Cooper, and do good work. All right.
Hi. So I have a question. While you mentioned that strategic foresighting is based off of financial models, do you think this strategic foresighting can be applied to each and every company or an industry wherein who's just a startup or just a disruptor in the market?
I think it needs to be, yeah. I think in order to do good business, that you need to have an A, B, C, and D plan, right?
And would you think like innovation labs in most companies are kind of working towards like strategic foresighting? That's exactly what they're doing?
I don't know. I don't think they are. I think a lot of times their scope, like, not to say anything bad, I have friends in innovation labs, but they might not be thinking about the full scope. They might not be true futurists, thinking of the full the full effect, or projecting far enough out, or with enough variables. So on the futures cone, like, the innovation labs are probably projecting out from like the flashlight to there, so from A to B, right? But if we're doing strategic foresighting in the way that I've envisioned it, we're going from A to B to D to E to F.2, and their contexts and cases there. So they might be is the answer, but I don't know, and I don't think so.
So that means they're just fantastic. They're not a good designer.
No, I don't want to say that either, at all.
Okay.
I just wanted to, like,
thank you,
rile you guys up a little. Yeah.
So if you're a designer designing in a company that's really just focused on the next quarter or where the next dollar is coming from, how can you bring some of these techniques in and make that part of your process, projecting out, or even possibly integrate that into the company's process a little?
Yeah, that's a great question. It starts with a conversation. So it is design. So you can do a short workshop, and it's something that may be at the end of a quarter or at mid-year or at the end of a year. You run a strategic design workshop internally with your CEO, with key stakeholders that affect the direction of your product and your service and your business, so that they have skin in the game, and that they are I mean, it's, in the end, it's their, it's their future too. So it's not a hard sell if you pitch it appropriately. Yeah, and I'll be doing a workshop in November on that, so that might be helpful as well.
This is very cool stuff, by the way.
Thanks, I think so too.
Yeah, thanks, Poppe. I'm really inspired by some of those things you mentioned.
Fantastic.
How can we be sure that we are speculating for good? And because sometimes things can become a two-edged sword that could
Right.
be used even more effectively
Yeah.
in other ways than we
Mhm.
would. That would probably benefit the most of the people. Thanks.
Right. Yeah, that's a very good point and a good question, and it has been brought up. There was an article recently wrote about, like, corporations are now doing speculative design, and it's creepy, right? Because they have profit at the end of the game. So that's why I'm evangelizing to designers to be ethical, right? Like, follow your gut, do the right thing. You know that if this is marginalizing a specific population, you're also designing it, right? Like, you can control what you're doing. I recently had a situation where I thought I was going to be doing something that was going to create harm, and I stopped, had had a conversation and pivoted the direction of the product. So I think we have time for one last question. Yes.
Hi. My question, the time frames for different versions. So how does it look, 1 year into the future, 3 years, 5 years, in terms of practicality and prioritizing, what you're searching for? Because part of me thinks, yeah, we should be thinking 30 years ahead, but then it's like, can we even predict, 5 months?
Yeah.
And like, what is kind of that sweet spot, and how do you decide that time range?
Yeah, that's a very good point. So the way to do that is to frame it appropriately. So as designers, we are always doing the problem framing. When you do speculative design workshops, set different boundaries and constraints, and then stick to them so that you know that you're focusing in the right direction. So again, it's sticking to your narrative, understanding the context and the consequences of these actions, and communicating that, and making sure you have the right framing. I think it's not that simple. It's not easy. I didn't give you like a lot of real guidance on how to do this, but it's out there, and it's something that I'm really passionate about bringing to the Midwest, bringing in our organizations, because like we have Lilly here, we have Roche, we have Rolls-Royce, we have a lot of big companies. Caterpillar is represented here as well. We have a lot of big companies doing things that impact our future. So, and we are at the front lines doing it. So that's it. Thank you.